Hello again. As you may or may not know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and INE has invited me down here to their Durham, North Carolina offices in order to do a number of interviews with networking professionals. I'm here with Will Murrell today, Senior Network Engineer at Unicom Systems, Inc.
Yes.
Yes.
That would be it.
That would be it. So, okay, so I guess the first question is what is Unicom Systems, Inc.?
Unicom Systems is a subsidiary of Unicom Global. Unicom Global has their hands in a whole lot of different pies. So Unicom Systems itself is overall software company, so we got a lot of software products, came from the Macro 4 portfolio. Also a lot of IBM products, so their business intelligence stuff, Focal Point, Purify Plus, which is used for cleaning up code and everything. So they made some acquisitions, purchased that, so now Unicom has those. Our actual office here in the Raleigh, Durham area does professional services though. We're the only office for Unicom Systems that actually does that. So we do consulting and design and all that good stuff.
Okay, and so what do you do as like a senior network engineer? Like what's what's your job look like?
What don't I do? Yeah. So I focus mainly on the network stuff, routing, switching. I've taken on the wireless portion now that we had our wireless engineer leave. I'm starting to dabble in virtualization, so VMware and stuff as well. System stuff. We do have a senior systems engineer that does that, but I'm kind of his backup, so I'm good with Windows, Linux, all that good stuff. I just voice, security. I wear a lot of hats.
So do you do that internally then, or do you go out to client sites?
We go out to client sites. We consult with them. So we've got a few companies in the area that we do that for. Also, if they have anything internally that needs done, if they need some assistance, I'm always there to lend a helping hand. So they like to lean.
Okay. And so then how did you start? So it says you have, it's always funny when you see this, 15 plus years. What does plus mean? Does that mean 16 years or does that mean 15 years and 2 months?
It means that I don't like going on LinkedIn and typing a whole lot.
Okay.
So I hit the 15 years. So
basically
what happened was I started with technology and stuff like that whenever I was a teenager. Professionally speaking, I didn't get into it until I was in the Army, where I was actually getting a paycheck for it. So that's where I'm kind of starting that timer at. It was whenever I started in the military. So I hit that 15-year mark from the time that I got in, and I was like, oh, I can just write a 15 here and add a little plus, and that'll cover me for at least another 5 years. So once I hit 20, I can change it to a 20. So maybe it's a little bit laziness on my part. That's why I like automation, I guess.
So then you went, and so you started in the Army then in '99, right?
Yeah, well, no, so I started in the Army, I actually got in 2000.
2000,
yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you do that decision then? What was the?
Aimlessness.
Okay,
I was kind of at a loss of what I was doing. So I actually went to college initially for dance. Yes.
Well, there you go.
I was a competitive dancer. Did ballet, jazz.
Well, you were a competitive, not just college. But
I was a competitive dancer. So that's actually a thing. Not everybody knows that, but it's actually a big thing that they got. So the show Dance Moms.
I've heard of it.
So I think it's on TLC or something. My daughter and her friend are obsessed with it. But competitive dancing, I did that for years. Really? And I ended up getting a scholarship to University of Illinois to do that. And my sister was actually the reason why I dropped out and came back home, because she had cancer. She had a relapse, and I got kind of depressed about the whole thing and ended up getting out and coming back home. And she started getting better, and I was like, well, do I really want to go back and kind of take that back up again, or do I want to do something else? So I started going to the community college, and they had a tech course there for CCNA, for networking. And since I'd already been interested in computers and dealt with networks a little bit from whenever I was a teenager. That's a whole separate story. I said, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. And I ended up getting my CCNA then for the very first time. And from there, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I ended up joining the Army. And I got kind of fooled whenever I picked my job.
How's that?
So the name of the 31 Foxtrot MOS was Network System Switching Operator Maintainer. And I was like, it says network and it says systems. It's got to be, computers and stuff. It's not. It was like analog legacy telephone systems. That's where the operator comes in. And so I was a little disappointed. There was some data portions like, X.25 packet switched networks.
Oh, you actually used that?
Yeah.
I don't ever heard of that.
Oh yeah, it was. We're talking old school stuff. We're talking the big floppies were running the whole system. And so they started introducing upgrades into the switches, as we call them, which are the actual enclosures that sat on the back of like a 5-ton truck or a Humvee and stuff. And they started putting like HP switches in there or Cisco switches. And I kind of got hooked up with a warrant officer while I was in Korea who was doing all these installs, and I started asking a lot of questions. And he answered those questions, and he liked that I was very, a go-getter about the whole thing, and I kind of followed him around and started learning more and more about it. So I already had that. But I mean, we're talking back in '99. The CCNA was kind of, not a whole lot to it, not like today. So, so I'd got more and more knowledge under my belt. And as things progressed while I was in the military, the equipment got better and better and better. And then we had like by the time I got out, we had the joint network node. And the JNN was virtually all COTS equipment in there. So we had a nipper side and a sipper side. Normal internet and secret internet, essentially. We had exchange servers, we had call managers, we did VoIP phone systems, and we had our own PBX in there where we could do 2-wire phones, and we would drop these hard green boxes that had switches in there so everybody could link up to it. We did high-speed satellite shots and all. We're dealing with current generation equipment by this time. Configuration of it, troubleshooting of the links, and all that good stuff. So. Ton of experience there. I knew the system cold just because of how involved I had been with it before, and because all the stuff that the warrant officer was doing was really building to that. General Dynamics was the key contractor that was designing the system, and what ended up happening is General Dynamics came to me because I had trained some of the soldiers who weren't able to attend the training class. And they were like, do you want to be a trainer when you get out? So they offered me a job as a trainer teaching the new JNN system to first the soldiers that were going to deploy with the system, because we actually were the first operational JNN in Iraq. And what happened though was because my knowledge was so valuable, they stop-lossed me. I was supposed to get out after 5 years, ended up doing the deployment, got out after 6. And that job wasn't there anymore, so I had to find something, and that's what ended up bringing me to the Raleigh-Durham area.
So if you're dealing with the modern mill, because I served in the mid-90s, and that was a thing, is a technology, the military. We were literally still learning. We had to learn vacuum tubes.
Well, no. So the original equipment I was over, there was a lot of vacuum tube stuff. Had electronics repair. We had all that stuff going on. So we had to be able to fix that stuff at the start. It was not until after I'd been in a few years. So we actually got the new joint network node equipment towards the end of 2004, beginning of 2005. And that's when all of that stuff, the first ones kind of rolled out, and everybody started training on the things. So everything was kind of lead up. They were doing like one-for-one replacements of certain components in the older switches and stuff.
So do you think if somebody joined now, would they still have to worry about that?
No. So most of the branches now, except in a few key areas, you might run into it like in Korea or parts of Germany. Okay, some of the old holdovers, they might still have some of the old Fesses and 39 Deltas and stuff like that. Yeah. But most of the stuff should be, normal COTS equipment now on the commo side of things. Yeah, so you're going to be more often than not working with current grade technology. So.
Okay. So you come out of the Army, and then what did you decide to do? How did you?
So it basically came down to who gave me a job offer letter first.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get the job offer? Because that's one of the things. Again, at least in my service, they always said, when you get out, people are going to be lining up to hire you. And then I got out, and it was like ghost town. So how did that work?
I was luckier than most, just because of how well I knew the technology, and because that applied experience and stuff. I think I was driven a whole lot by the need to support my family, as well as my love of all things technology. So I'm an avid reader. Okay, I just love reading whatever I can get my hands on. So I'll read a tech manual, I'll read, fiction stuff, just whatever is at hand. If I'm bored, I pick it up and start reading. So I was very up to date and current with everything. Okay. And I interviewed for a few weeks leading up. By the time I got back, I think I had a month and a half before I actually ETS'd out of the Army. And I just started throwing my resume out there. Okay. And the two big contenders were CenturyTel. I think they're CenturyLink now. Yeah. Okay. But they're based out of Louisiana, and then AT&T. Okay. So I interviewed with both of them, and CenturyTel had a lot of red tape to go through, just because it was a direct position with them. AT&T was a contractor position through another company, so it was kind of streamlined. They talked to me, and then within like a day or two, they had already talked to the contract company and said, we want to hire this guy. So it was just a matter of who gave me that letter first. It was either Louisiana or here in the Raleigh-Durham area, and they got me the letter first. So I was like, okay, let's do this thing. So that's how I ended up down here.
So would you, especially for the military folks that are getting out now, like there can be a lot of issues with transition that nobody even talks about. You're just sitting there all of a sudden, you think you're going back to the normal life, and all of a sudden normal life isn't what you remember normal life to be. Mm-hmm. Do you have any like lessons learned like of the transition from going to the Army to AT&T, what you could have done better or what helped you in that transition?
Well, it's even now, I mean, compared to what the military is at now, so they're not really dealing with all the deployments and stuff that everybody was dealing with, 10 years ago. Yeah. So it was hard to transition for a lot of the guys that I know, and myself and everything, getting out from that. But even then, going from military discipline to the civilian world where your boss may or may not care what you're doing, they're not keeping up with you about your work, they're not checking up behind you. Yeah. Well, if you're lucky, and you don't have a micromanager. But it's more of just being conscious of what you're doing, being responsible. That's the biggest thing. I mean, you're responsible for your training. The Army, nobody's going to come up to you within reason. And sometimes part of your job comes up and they say, well, you need to learn this, so you're going to have to go do this. But a lot of times, you're having to do self-training, right? So you're going into that, and you have to keep up with that yourself to make sure your skill set is as solid as it needs to be. Yeah. And I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is just being responsible for yourself instead of relying on somebody else, your NCO or whoever, to be responsible for you. That's probably the biggest challenge, especially if you were lower enlisted. Okay. So.
And then, so I imagine if you came out with electronic certification, you probably had a clearance. Mm-hmm. Has that, as you've gone Have you weighed that for the jobs you take? Have you kept your clearance? Have you bothered? Do you wish you had it?
So the clearance thing actually came up while I was at AT&T. Because I had my top secret clearance, AT&T had a few positions inside dealing with some of their customers, because I was doing client support, managed network services type thing, that allowed me to play in that area and keep my clearance. And then it kind of went along, and it's fallen by the wayside just because I don't need it anymore.
Okay.
It's obviously an inactive state, and it's just sitting there. It would be easier for me to get my clearance than somebody who's never had one. But I would say clearance, if you have a clearance and you can get a job that allows you to keep it, whether you're actually using it or not, but a company that's willing to take it on because they have other areas that cover that, do it. Do it, because it opens up so many additional doors for you when it comes to positions and jobs and everything. Just having that already in place, because getting it is a nightmare. I mean, it takes forever to get your clearance finalized, depending on the level. Top secret, that's going to take a long time. Secret, not so much. But top secret cost a whole lot of money for a company to go through the process of getting it done, because they've got to send agents out to talk to people and all this other stuff. So
So if you have it, try to keep it.
If you have it, try to keep it. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So is that something, like when you went in, did you know what clearance you were going to get? Like, especially if you go into the Army, can you say, "Oh, I know I should get a top secret clearance, so get me something, give me a top secret"?
So it just depends on what you're doing. So your normal, so what I had normally for the position I had only requires a secret, but because of some of the locations I worked at and other things like that, required me to upgrade my clearance. And so that's the reason why I ended up getting out with a higher level clearance than someone normally would have with the MOS I had.
Okay. And so then you went over to AT&T, and you spent like 3 years there.
Yes.
So what do you do? And he's got like a whole page of stuff he did at AT&T. So summarize that.
Scut work. No, I'm joking. AT&T was an interesting experience, because that was really the first time I had been introduced to variances in network styles. Because the Army, is everything's kind of there. It's supposed to be in a particular way, and it's always going to be that way, no matter where you deploy or anything like that. It's going to be this way. And what happened at AT&T, I worked the GCSC, the Global Client Support Center. And that was kind of focused on their big 12 customers, right? So we're talking Postal Service, Pepsi, MetLife, big companies. And they all have little different quirks when it comes to their networks. And so I learned a whole lot of different things about networking styles, topologies, everything like that. And it was a very interesting experience. And then I started getting more with like ISDN. I'd never been exposed to ISDN really, except in what was in the books, right? Because it's like, does anybody really even use this anymore?
Yeah, because this would have been 2006.
When MasterCard used to be very big on ISDN for their backups and everything, just because everybody, we have to process credit card payments, and so they used to use that as a backup mechanism. So if their primary went down, dialer would pop up, and ISDN would go, and so that was interesting to learn about, and even now, I mean, there are some countries out there where ISDN is a means for some people to provide connectivity. I've seen it a few times in the past, like 3 years. So it's not dead yet. But AT&T was a very interesting experience, because eventually they merged our group and the managed network services, managed router services. And so then I started getting introduced to VoIP and everything else like that. It got a lot more. So I'd already been doing it in the military, some, configuring call manager and dropping phones and stuff like that. But got a much more dealing with dial peers and stuff like that on the router itself. So like call manager, express type setups and everything. That wider breadth of knowledge. And I enjoyed that. I just kind of soak all that stuff up like a sponge. Security became a big thing as well, and so it was very.
So did you get to do a lot of things? Because that's one of the big complaints once you go to a company, especially the size of AT&T, is you really do become a cog. It's like those people that you do GPOs, and that's all you do.
So I would say probably about 60 to 70% of the problems that arose most of the time was some kind of circuit issue, right? So the AT&T provided service because we were doing managed router services, stuff like that. So it was an AT&T router with an AT&T circuit, or maybe a different last mile provider or something like that. And the circuit would go down, the site would become isolated, and that was it. 60, 70% of the time, that's what the problem was. Or some kind of core outage somewhere, And so we didn't really get involved with that. The rest of the time, though, was you deploying a new, router, deploying a new switch or making some configurations on the network and other stuff like that. Troubleshooting, errors on the line, and so there was a lot of other things that we had to get into as well, And the nice thing about being so many problems, nice thing about problems with circuits. Was the fact that it allowed us to devote a lot more time, because most of the time it was very obvious, okay, this is a circuit issue, right? Or there's power problem at the site. So we got to focus a lot more of our time on the other problems, so that allowed me a lot of time to read and understand what was going on, and AT&T also provided training on stuff. That's where I got introduced to Juniper, learning with Junos and everything with their switches and routers and their WAN acceleration products and stuff. So it wasn't just Cisco, and so a lot of good exposure there. So it depends. Working for a big company can be good and it can be bad. It just depends where you land at. That's why it's always key to ask a lot of questions in the interview to figure out, to get a better explanation of what you'll be doing. Because a lot of times you'll see the job explanation. It'll say you need to be able to do this or be familiar with this. Well, what does it mean exactly that I have to be familiar with TCP/IP? Well, I mean, that's kind of a given if you're going to be in a network engineer position. Well, why exactly do I need to know this? And they always want to put these innocuous statements on there. You be familiar with this, and okay, I don't understand why. So tell me, explain to me exactly what my normal day. That's an awesome interview question. You had to ask the interviewer, what would my normal day to day be? So, and then ask for an abnormal version of that, and you probably get a pretty good feel for what you're going to be doing.
And then, so once you're in AT&T, like if you had just stayed with AT&T, the argument is always like certifications is good for getting jobs. So when you leave AT&T, you want as much paperwork as possible. But if they're giving you training, do you need papers to move up in a company, do you think?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
So always there's the performance aspect. Obviously, if you're performing above your peers, you're going to get looked at sooner for promotion or lateral transfers or management positions, all that good stuff, if you're interested in that. Sometimes though, you might have somebody that is just as good as you are, or close, or and maybe that person has a better rapport with the manager than you do. I've always been a little too direct for some people, so I'm not afraid to tell it how it is, and I don't like to sugarcoat things. Tact is not my strong point, and so I always had to set myself apart. So certifications is one way to do that, and so just. I'm not huge on certifications. Okay. Just from the standpoint, I don't feel like if I need to go out and get a certification, then I'll go out and get a certification. Okay. I'm doing that now, and working on my IE and or CCIE. And just because I need that for our company, to keep doing and have the benefits that we have, I have to get that certification. So I'm fine with doing that. But I feel I don't need, me personally, I don't need a certification to tell me that, you know, I'm a good engineer, you know? But if you need a way to set yourself apart from the pack, then again, certification is a good way to do that.
And then if you're with a big company like AT&T, so give or take, the rule of thumb is every 2 years you should be bouncing, at least up to either from a company to another company or just being promoted if you stick around too long. But the curious question is again, if you're dealing with a small company like INE or, you know, smaller things, obviously you need to bounce in order to get more experience.
Right.
But if you're someplace like AT&T, which obviously they have a huge number of opportunities, how long would you feel comfortable staying there before you would think people would start getting worried you're almost there too long?
Well, I mean, it depends, right? So there were a few guys that I worked with doing client support and everything that had been in the same role for 10 years.
Okay,
Their idea of advancement was they were getting paid more and they got away with more. You know, as in not doing as many tickets and stuff like that. Their metrics, you know, were looked at differently. Or maybe they took quote unquote higher level tickets. So it depends on your viewpoint. What exactly do you mean moving? I mean, if you have a change in responsibilities or you're dealing with higher level, you know, tickets, say in AT&T, higher priority or more complex, that can be seen, and you are getting the raise as well. I mean, that can be seen as a move because you're increasing in responsibilities. The problem there is, like you were talking about, the getting exposure to different things. I got exposed to a lot of different things, but they were kind of still in that key route switch area with little dabbles here and there and a little bit of voice, a little bit of security. I didn't want that. You know, that was kind of one, and it was the luckiest thing in the world for me to get hit with the whole recession thing.
Really?
By losing that position, that forced me to branch out anymore. And I had never seen myself as a specialist. But I got told by one of the old timers there that I needed to find my specialty. That I needed to make myself indisposable in that specialty. That way they could never get rid of me. I just kind of ingrain myself and be like, well, he's the only guy that knows this, you know, so you can't do anything with him. I think that is the biggest load of bull. The whole specialist route is absolutely ridiculous to me when it comes to networking. Granted, so there are some areas where it's great to have specialists, but networking in general, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, especially depending on your position and what you want to do with your life. I mean, so there's this whole movement now with the full stack engineer, right? So I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it. Just because of the way all the technologies are converging together and the way they're starting to work with each other, you can't implement one piece without knowing how some of the other pieces work. And if you're a specialist and you just focus on this one part, okay, here's my cable, or here's the port for you to plug into, you know, I'm done, right? You can't properly make the network play, you know? So the whole specialist thing is dead in my eyes, and that's actually one of my whole shticks right now. I've been preaching, you know. So don't be a specialist, be a generalist.
Really? So interesting. And so you say, so I guess AT&T was recession, but just out of curiosity, how often do you think you should be going out for interviews once you already have it, even if you have a job that you like when do you put your thing on a monster again? Just to get feelers, even if you don't technically want to leave. So I actually got this advice. If you have any change in responsibilities or what you're doing at your job, automatically go out and update your LinkedIn or your resume or whatever. Keep your resume updated. It should be no more than
3 to 6 months out of date, right? Because obviously you never know what's going to happen with the job. The climate could change, at the drop of a dime. You could get upset with the direction the company's taking, or they could lose a bunch of money and fire you and a bunch of other people, or whatever. You could do something dumb, lose your job. So your resume should never be out of date. I heard some advice from one of my friends, and he said that even if you're happy in your job, maybe every 6 months or so, take an interview. Just to see what's out there. Go search for jobs and see what is available to where you're at in your skill level. Because a lot of times, even though you're doing all these, so what I do now is consulting, right? So I lots of different exposure to technologies and stuff. But there may be a need or a call for a certain area somewhere that maybe you're not as strong in, and taking an interview is kind of justification, if you need any, to go out and research that, and and it also lets you know what other companies are thinking about as far as what they need for engineers. So I'd say, just for the hell of it, every 6 months or so, go out, take an interview and see what happens. And who knows? I mean, you might come across your absolute dream job, and you interviewed for it, and now you're better off than you were. I mean, things have a tendency of dropping in your lap sometimes.
Well, I guess that's the thing, is because I haven't been an employee for so long now, but back when I was, Monster was still new and all that. And so a lot of people worried about getting blacklisted because it wasn't as normal that resumes were simply posted 24/7. The idea was you post your resume when you want a job, you take it. And so the problem is if your HR person was looking for a new employee and then saw your resume, then bad things would happen.
Yeah. Welcome to the age of LinkedIn.
So with taking interviews now, in general, do you think you could get blacklisted? Do you think that could cause you problems with the company that you're currently at?
It depends on your company.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, generally speaking, I don't think so. No, that would happen. But if you have a very vindictive HR or manager or something, and something comes back to them, it's a possibility. I mean, I'm not going to 100% say no, that would never happen, because there's dumb people out there, not so nice, so you can't say it's not going to 100% happen. But on the converse side of that, let's say that your HR department does find out that you're shopping for a new job, and it does get back to your boss. Depending on the type of employee you are, that might be a good thing. They might be like, oh, well, maybe we should see about reconsidering that raise, or let's go back and look at his performance, and or her, and see what's going on with them. Is there a reason why they're not so happy, or looking for another job? So
And then, because you have a few jobs after this, so because again, one of the problems that people have, especially with the 6-month mark, if they're not truly looking for work, is the question of, do you find you have to do interviews but in the 9 to 5 schedule, or will people meet with you at 6 or 7 or whatever?
It depends on how hard up they are.
There you go.
And also because of the way HR departments and stuff work nowadays, and how spread out all the different companies are, you may be interviewing for a position that's local, but your manager may be on the West Coast. So you might be able to interview after hours. I see a lot, I get a lot of LinkedIn mails and stuff like that, soliciting for, interviews and everything, that, they're willing to do Skype interview, and so they would give me a time, when's good time for you, and, stuff like that. So I think, and even if you have to do it 9 to 5, I mean, you got your lunch break, if you can do it over Skype,
Interesting.
then you just hold your phone up and talk like that. So,
Okay.
or tablet or however. So, because the technology is there now, it doesn't have to interfere as much as it once did, where you got to dress up in your suit and drive across town and wait, until you can get in to see the guy, and then do, your hour-long, sometimes longer interview. I've had longer, and then pop smoke and try to get back to your office.
So telephone and Skype interviews. These are more normal, because again, back when I was an employee, you might get it, but it was really weird and far between. So now doing like a Skype interview is a more normal thing to do then.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Actually, so my AT&T interview that I did was over the phone.
Really?
Yeah, so I did an over the phone interview for that and for the CenturyTel job. Both of them were over the phone. They made allowances since I was located in Kentucky, because that's where I was stationed at Fort Campbell. And so they made allowances to do telephone interviews and everything. It depends on the situation. If you have a good HR person, or whoever's looking, they can make a lot of allowances. But yeah, I think that's really the norm nowadays with telephone and Skype, just because you get a lot of remote positions now too. That's a big thing. The ability to work at a position that's based in Colorado or something and stay here in the Triangle or whatever. So they wanted. I think that FaceTime is a key thing, though. Everybody really wants to see the other person's face and reaction, and make sure if they're asking technical questions, and you're not sitting there with a book and going, it's here somewhere. So
that's a curious thing, like talking about the remote work, because remote work has come up so much. And once you get further in your career, and you actually know what you want, whether you do remote or in person is your own thing. But when you're still new in your career, let's say you're in the 2 or 3 year mark, how do you consider remote work? Because there's a lot of that question.
Oh, I would never, and never, never. It takes, especially if you are going for a 100% remote position, it takes a special individual.
Oh, wow.
It takes a very special individual, because so you're working at your house. You can roll out of bed in your underwear and put on your slippers and walk into whatever room you're using as your office and start working, right? And the distractions in your own home that are possible. It takes a very special individual. Even now, as far along in my career as I am, I find it very tough to work from home. Just because, also I've got, I'm married, I've got 4 kids. My youngest is 3. So he doesn't go off to school or anything. My older 3 are in school, so they're gone during the day. But just with my 3-year-old and my wife in the house, and my wife has gotten much better about it than she was, about not bothering me if I'm working from home, because technically I'm at work, right? So you can't ask me to come do a load of dishes. I got a conference call coming up. But my 3-year-old does not get the idea. So all of a sudden he's busting up in the room. I'm on a call with a client or somebody, Daddy! And, they're like, what's that sound? Oh, nothing. You get out. So it takes a very special individual, good environment that you have to set up, so you can keep yourself focused on the job at hand. So, if you have like rock steady nerves and focus and determination and stuff, okay, go for it. But if you have any question about your capability of working from home, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't take a 100% remote work, because you will get yourself in trouble. I guarantee. It may not be within the first month or 2, but there will come a time where you're going to wake up and be like, I know I'm supposed to be working, but I'm going to go on a Netflix binge, and next thing you know, you've got emails piled up and work piled up, and your boss is saying, why isn't this done? And you're like, Daredevil was new episodes. So that's just my 2 cents on the thing. And some people may disagree, but I think early in your career it is a bad idea to aim for a 100% remote job unless you're that special individual.
So do you think you can, if you are that special individual, Do you think it'll hurt your advancement? Because that's one thing, like if you're not around to schmooze with people, I always believe in office politics and schmoozing. Do you think it'll matter?
Well, I mean, you can schmooze over the phone and via email and stuff. A lot of these remote positions require you to travel occasionally, like maybe come into the mothership, you know, and say hello. But no, I don't think it hurts for advancement. I think it may hurt your skill set some. Just because a lot of these remote positions are specialized positions.
Okay.
So you see what I did there? And so they're looking for very key individuals to do this certain kind of work. And a lot of time it turns out to be contract work anyway. But there are some full-time positions, you know, with the company doing remote work. But again, sometimes it requires a lot of travel, you know, so it's, you're traveling and being able to work from home when you're home.
Okay, so you were at AT&T, you did all that stuff, but then you were a Cisco Networking Academy instructor at the pub. Oh, really? I did not expect that reaction.
No,
either.
so no. I love teaching.
Okay.
I absolutely love sharing knowledge and stuff. One of the best times that I had was when I was in the military was teaching my soldiers stuff about the switches and doing training exercises and stuff like that. And I thought this was a great idea to do. Working in the public school sector, a lot of politics.
Huh, really?
Yes. Politics. When you have a bunch of students fail a test that is supposed to allow them to get a voucher to get Cisco certified, and they tell you to pass those people, or to grade on a curve to allow a larger amount of people to pass, so they can get those vouchers and it can look on paper that it was a success. I'm not going to do that. Because obviously, so you're at the school and it says you passed a test that's comparable to what you would get if you went to go get certified, right? But if they went and took that voucher that they had gotten to go get certified and then they fail and everybody's going to be like, well, you passed it here, why didn't you get it there? Well, it's because teacher graded on a scale and I'm not going to do that. So I walked out after. I walked out after I was told to do that. So,
So curious though, so you were actually with the school system.
I was actually a teacher for the school system, yes.
So then, I mean, because you had your military experience, you had your AT&T stuff and all that. Was it actually a viable job? Because I mean, that's the whole argument. Is that
you're starting to get into this dangerous minds thing, right? You know, remember the movie with Michelle Pfeiffer where she was the teacher and the...
Oh, I do.
No. Anyway, so.
Yeah. But I mean, like, is it, you know, like when you think, is there the money and the benefits? Was it really worth? I mean, if it hadn't gone sideways.
If it hadn't gone sideways, yes.
Really? Okay.
I think the money wouldn't have been what I would have been making private sector, but because of my love of teaching, sharing knowledge. And the additional free time that I would have had to pursue other avenues of technology on my own. I think it would have been viable for myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, the money's nice. But the key thing for me is technology and sharing that information. And if you get a bunch of young minds that are interested in the program, you know, that's one thing. But when you get kids shoved into the class because they want to fill it and they didn't have any other place to put them, then you're getting into a realm where you've got 60 kids and only 8 of them want to actually learn the technology.
Really? So they would do that? Because, I can't imagine taking a bored 16-year-old and trying to teach them Cisco. Like trying to teach them English is bad enough.
They put no prerequisites for the class.
Really?
They have networking 101 classes in the school system at the high schools and stuff. They didn't even put that as a prerequisite.
Really?
Anybody who wanted to sign up to go into it could go into it. So you had those legitimate kids that were interested in learning about it. But then you had the other kids that they didn't know what to do with them. You know, from their home schools, because where this was at was a academy that, well, not an academy. It was a school that was more for professional development, because the whole idea was not every kid's going to go to college directly after high school.
Yeah.
They may need a viable job option to support themselves or their family or anything like that, or to put themselves through school.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, that's a cool thing, right?
Yeah.
And so they had a lot of different things there. They had barbering and small engine repair, small business administration, scientific visualization, which is basically working with graphics and stuff like that. And then they had the Cisco networking. And but they, again, no prerequisites. So they were trying to put as many bodies into this new school as they could.
Yeah.
So they were taking the kids that weren't going to pass otherwise if they didn't have the extra credits. And I hope I don't get a lawsuit from Durham Public Schools. But so they were taking these kids from their home school and then busing them to this school so they could get those additional credits and graduate. And so they were just slapping into whatever class. So you had a lot of disruptive kids in these classes, kids who were known troublemakers and stuff like that. And
in the Cisco class.
In the Cisco, I had one class. I had one kid that was constantly causing problems. Would get up and walk out and walk back in, wouldn't listen, and just talking to other people, wouldn't do his classwork or anything like that. I mean, and I'm like, so I tried to find out what the deal with this kid was, and he was a known troublemaker at his home school, and they it was an interesting experience. It was a learning experience.
So then why did you spend, so 1 year, 8 months, was that basically two years for them? Or did you just walk out in the middle of class one day?
No. Actually, I think that might be a typo on the time frame, because that was actually just one school school year. Yeah, I guess maybe the I think I might have got the time frame wrong on putting that in. Yeah, no, it was just one school year that I did it. I started, built the lab, did all the coursework and everything for them, and gave it to them. And at the end of the school year, when they did the EOGs, EOCs, or whatever you want to call it, and they a bunch of them didn't pass. The principal was like, grade on a curve. And I'm like, no, you do it. I'm not doing it, and I left. So
that's it. So with that then, because one of the things that I get with a lot of my viewers is they go through these academies and then they somehow think that there's going to be a good job at the other side. 18 years old, graduate of the Cisco Academy, and they even get their CCNA. They're even like, I got the real piece of paper. Okay, let's say you go through this. Let's say you're one of the 8 kids that actually pays attention. You get your CCNA, you're 18 years old. What does this actually do for you?
It sets you apart from the other 18-year-olds that want to get a $15 or $20 an hour job.
Okay,
yeah.
Can you get a $15 or $20 an hour job with this as an 18-year-old?
Yeah.
Really? Think so?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there are enough openings at a bunch of, especially if you're willing to do the contract work and stuff. Because a lot of these, just like these low-level call centers or customer support, stuff like that, they need bodies and seats. They need people to answer the phone. And you can get that, and that's where it comes into play, right? So if you're an 18, 19-year-old kid and you've got the Cisco certificate, and you're going into a call center to do, level 0, level 1 support, right? And you have that CCNA. Let's say you do that job for a year or 2 years. Okay. Now you've got experience and a CCNA. Then that's when you start shopping around.
But I think the important thing here, though, so you have your CCNA and you're still going into a call center. You're not CCNA going into a data center.
No, you are not CCNA. Oh, well, you can run rack and stack jobs. You're not, just because you have a CCNA, you are not going to end up being, super duper network engineer extraordinaire making $90,000 a year. Not going to happen at all, unless you are one lucky individual that managed to pull off some kind of black magic voodoo. So yeah, you're not. You can get a good job for an 18, 19-year-old kid. You're going to get a really good job.
Yeah.
But you're going to need that certification along with that experience is the big thing, right?
Okay.
I mean, I could, my kid, is smart enough that if I brain dumped him, he could go take the CCNA exam and pass. Okay, but just because he has that CCNA doesn't mean he can do all these things. All right, it's the experience is the key thing. So that's what you have. Everybody needs to keep in mind. If you don't have that experience with all the gear and doing the commands over and over and over again, because that's what it is, very repetitive. If you don't have that experience, you're not going to get anywhere.
Okay.
That piece of paper, you might as well set it on fire and throw the ashes into the air.
So that's one thing too, is with the kids coming out now, because it's really weird. Like, people don't understand how the dynamic has changed in a relatively short period of time, 15 years. And so what I always talk about was I was a 23-year-old. I was dealing with $500,000 build-outs. I was dealing with a lot of stuff that there was no way in hell I would ever hire a 23-year-old to do, simply because I was the only person dumb enough to do it.
Yeah.
So I guess, but that's one thing like a lot of people don't realize, is that time has changed. So if you're young, if you're 18 or 19, there's all the stories about our generation who went out there and were able to do all this stuff because there was nobody else to do it. Reasonably now, how many years experience before you start to do something that's probably pretty cool? 5 years, 10 years? Can you really do anything cool in 2 years?
In 2 years, probably not, unless you're a rock star.
Yeah.
I mean, there are those rare individuals out there that, in the 2 years that they've been working that, low-level support, they've been reading those books. They've been, going after that CCNP level, just that's generalized, not necessarily Cisco. I'm just, so everybody knows what I'm talking about. But they're going for that professional level of knowledge as opposed to that associate level knowledge.
Yeah.
And so those guys are rock stars, right?
Yeah.
So that's the abnormal. I'd say within 3 to 5 years, you might get pulled onto a team that's doing something cool. If you do well at that, after that 5-year period, you might actually be leading a team that's doing the cool stuff. So I think that key mark is right around that 5-year period where cool things begin to happen, as long as you have that demonstrable level of skill, that level of knowledge. So
and then I guess with that too, I mean, I don't want to get you into trouble, but would you inherently trust a 20-year-old? Like, because that's the thing, we have a lot of young people, and with programming, like if you're in the startup world, they are where we were, where you can be a 19-year-old making $150 a year, doing amazing things. In IT, in networking, are you really going to trust a 20-year-old?
It depends on the 20-year-old.
Okay.
That's why that FaceTime interview, comes into play. I mean, 'cause you don't get a lot of the knowledge from just hearing somebody's voice, right? You can kind of get a little bit from it, but actually seeing that person interact face to face, whether it's through a screen or meeting them in person, you get that one-on-one level, and you can actually see, how they react to things. And it would be a special 20-year-old that I would trust to do some of the stuff, but I can't say that I would never trust a 20-year-old, because I'm sure there's some out there, but generally speaking, the 20-year-old guys will probably be getting the scut work, go pick up all those routers, go rack that 6800.
Well,
So,
I guess that brings the question, though, because you talk about like certifications versus education. And again, when you start talking to people that are like 30 years old, and there's just a respect for you being a little older. So certification, a lot of people. But like, I guess I would argue, just question with you, is like with your kid, would it be worth it to go through college for 4 years in some ways just to gain maturity?
yes.
Like, yeah, you can get a job at 18, but what's it gonna be? Why don't you go through 4 years of school, get some maturity, education? I mean, is that?
So here's the thing about college, right? College really hones you for a certain way of thinking, depending on what kind of degree you get. So and what kind of activities you're doing at college. Yeah, college teaches so many soft skills, right? Just the way to study. I mean, so if you're going into IT, right, you just can't expect things to just happen and learn this knowledge by osmosis. Obviously, to keep up to date on technology, we have to read, we have to train, we have to, do all these things, and you don't just magically know how to do those things just because you're an engineer. Or any kind of IT specialist. You have to train your soft skills in addition to your hard skills. And college is very good about that. I finished up my degree while I was in the military. And but I got it, right? So that's something I felt I needed to do. And I've told my kids, I was like, look, you're gonna go to college. You're gonna go to college. As smart as you think you are, or you plan on being, or whatever you plan to do, you're gonna go to school for it. My youngest girl, she wants to be a dancer when she grows up. You're gonna go to college, but I don't have to. I want to go to Broadway, and I'm like, you're gonna go to college. So it's just you pick up additional, in addition to whatever it is you're trying to learn at college. It's those extra soft skills that really make the difference, and that's why there's so many IT guys that I run across that actually have some kind of liberal arts degree or something. It's because they learn those awesome research soft skills. I know one guy that was an MP, and last time I talked to him, he was working on his IE. He was a few years older than me. He had a history degree. And he was a network engineer, and he was working on getting his IE. That's a lot of studying right there to be a history major, So I mean, it's those skills that you get from doing that. So I would say, yes, go to college, do that. I mean, and the awesome thing to do would be to work while you're in college. And so then all of a sudden you get done and you've got 4 years of experience and a college degree, and you're light years ahead of the game right there.
So then you got your computer science degree.
Yes.
So with where you're at now, which is curious because you're IT, CCIE, so computer science isn't really, people don't realize. I mean, but not. So is that the same, would you do that degree, if you knew the direction you were going to end up going, would you still have done computer science, or would you have gone IS?
Well, so when I was doing because I did all my stuff online, there weren't really any networking degrees online at that time frame. It was really starting to become a thing, but there were no available programs for me to do for that. So, I mean, probably I would have gotten a degree that, if it was available, that was associated with networking somehow. But because of the CS degree, the computer science degree, that allows me additional levels of knowledge and dabbling in areas that you wouldn't necessarily dabble in. So a lot of engineers nowadays, like to play with Python or have a little bit of knowledge of scripting and stuff like that, just so they can write some rudimentary scripts to automate things, because you have 200 devices you need to push configs out to. You don't want to log into 200 different devices and do it. So being able to write a basic shell script or something to do that awesome, right? But the level of advancement of the different things you can do, working with the APIs from different companies and vendors and stuff like that, if you know how to actually do clean code, it's fantastic. So I mean, it helped me in the long run. So I'm happy I was actually went that direction. But it all depends on what you want to do. So.
And then, so you're saying you got an online degree.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about an online degree?
As long as it's from a reputable school, I mean, you don't want to get a computer science degree from, Jack's Crosstown College, that's been in business for 2 years. But if it's a reputable school that has their own campuses, and so I think that's the key thing, right? Right there. If they are all online, if you couldn't go to wherever their headquarters is at and take a class there, you probably shouldn't do it. So just because I think that's a key thing. That if they don't have classes that you can physically take, if it's all online, there might be some question of how legitimate that they are, So, I know a lot of people that have done University of Phoenix, Grantham's a big one. Who are some of the other ones? I can't even remember off the top of my head who some of the other ones are. But there's quite a few of them nowadays, and a lot of them work with the military. American Military University, I think, is another big one.
So how would you, especially at the level you're at, because it's like you say University of Phoenix, and I snigger a little bit. Like when you say like Grantham University, no offense to Grantham, I've never heard of it before. I guess that's one of the questions: is how the hell do you know if it's reputable?
Well, so I was lucky enough that I was able to go through the military, and they would give me information about the schools, and because they were getting payouts from the VA from the Army tuition assistance, they had to be certified through them to be eligible to get payments. So I kind of got the jump up on that. The Army did all the legwork for me there. But if you're just your everyday guy and you don't know anything, research. I mean that's really the only thing that you can do is to research it. Hop online. Google is your friend.
Is there anyone, because again, one of the big questions I get from people, is there a special university? Is there like the Yale of IT? I don't know.
I have absolutely no clue in that realm. I will tell you that a lot of the community colleges have pretty solid IT-based, 2-year programs, in and out. Don't do IT university or my computer class.
Oh, I just started hearing that.
Those guys. I tell you what, I knew someone that was going to go take classes from there because they wanted to retrain from what they were doing. They were like a mover or something like that, right? And he was like, I'm going to go to my computer class, and take all those classes there and everything, and they've got a payment plan and all that. I think it came out to be for an 18-month program to learn about Cisco and a bunch of other stuff. It was like some ridiculous amount of money, like $15,000-$20,000 or something. And I'm like, why are you going to be paying that? You could go to the community college and do a 2-year course for couple grand, if that, and and even turn around and doing self-taught if that's what you wanted to do. But I don't know. I don't think there's a Yale or Harvard of IT universities.
Good that question. So right now you're going for the CCIE.
Yeah.
You haven't done your master's yet. How do you feel about the master's? Is that personal preference? You just don't think it's valuable?
Personal preference.
Okay.
I mean, some people, for advancement in their company and stuff, they may need the master's degree to go after it and everything. But I mean, I don't think it's a necessary thing. I don't need any kind of master's in business administration. I'm not running a business. I have no desire to run a business. Or I don't need a master's in IT infrastructure, or whatever weird ones that they have now. I think the information systems. I think that's I think that just kind of sounds silly to me personally. And it might be for some people. Some people feel that they might need that distinction, especially if they work at some of the bigger companies. That's one of the big things where it's so hard to get noticed, right, for those promotions and stuff. They may need to get master's degrees and everything. my dad and my stepmom went and got their master's degree very late in life.
Huh, yeah.
And they got their master's degrees just so they could get bumps in pay grades. And you know, so that's one of the things. You may need to do that depending on where you're working. But I think overall, no, it's not necessary.
No, okay, so college degree, not necessarily master's.
Yeah.
So I see. So when you went to the public school, you were in the Durham.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you finish serving your military in? Where did you?
No, I got out in. I was at Fort Campbell.
Fort Campbell.
So we were in Kentucky.
Kentucky. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, what was it? A decision to come here?
Yes.
Was it AT&T? So what was your decision to come to this area then?
Well, no. It was AT&T. I mean, they were the first. I mean, we were going to end up in Louisiana, which at first I was hoping for Louisiana because I'm originally from Texas.
Okay.
And so I was like, yeah, Louisiana. And but AT&T came through first, and it was actually funny. We got moved in down here, and on the very day that I was getting ready to start work, I think about an hour after I started at AT&T, my first day there, I got a call from CenturyTel saying, hey, we've got our offer together. You want to do a verbal, and then we'll mail you over the letter. And I'm like, I just started my new job. So, but that's what brought us down here. I had absolutely no clue how big into tech RTP was. No clue that the Triangle was so saturated with technology companies.
So as an IT professional now, I mean, do you think this is a good area to be in? I mean, would you leave willing? Like, are you like, I've got a job, so I'm staying, but if I could go to Austin, I would go. I mean, is there?
It would take the right offer for me to move to Texas with my family, because I mean, we've been in the area for, it'll be 10 years in the fall.
Okay,
And so we're pretty rooted here now. All kids, all the friends and everything. But as far as the area goes for jobs, I mean, it's so rich in jobs.
It really is.
I mean, and with all the different companies and stuff, I mean, it would be, Austin would be a good area in Texas to go to, as well as Dallas is another, good one. I think those are some of the biggest, probably the 5, at least in my opinion, the 5 biggest areas that you could go to are in like the San Jose, Silicon Valley area, Austin, Dallas, here in Boston, right? As far as Metroplex area goes, those lot of technology companies all centered around those different areas.
So if you were a noob, you were just starting out, would this be like the LA for noobs in tech? Like, should you just come here, get a pizza delivery job, and see if you can make it? See if you can make it as an IT professional.
Here or in Texas would probably be better options because of cost of living. I would not want to be a newbie trying to break into the tech field, having to pay what it costs to live up in Boston or out in California. Never California. Take a job in California after you're already in, and you're able to make the money that it takes to live in California. It'd be a pretty good area to break into the field.
So how would you do that here? Because like in a lot of areas, like if you go to Seattle or if you go to the more normal tech areas, there are a crap ton of meetups. Like if you want to network, you can go 5 nights a week and never buy beer or pizza again. Is it the same way here? Is it a little harder to schmooze?
Yeah, there are a lot of technology geek meetups. There are some other cloud computing meetups, cloud networking. I actually run one of them, Triangle Network Engineers. So you can search it on meetup.com. But there are enough that you could get introduced to people in the area, and slowly working your way around. And one of the other good benefits of being here in the RTP area, where there's so many technology companies, are the contract companies, the consulting companies, recruiters abound. They abound. They are all over the place. So it would be pretty I don't want to say super easy,
Yeah.
but it would be fairly easy to network enough to, I would be highly surprised if you went longer than 6 months without finding even an entry-level IT position around here. I mean, I know here and there are some people who have, your mileage may vary, but generally speaking, I mean, it's hard to go longer than 3 months without having somebody want to snatch you up. For if you're willing to take the job, of course. That is a key caveat. If you're not willing to take the job or do the work, then obviously you're Cinderella, and you got to have that right, perfect fit glass slipper. But
So is there any particular technology that's considered super sexy here? Because again, it's really interesting, like the different areas, like in Austin, Ruby on Rails is like the thing. Like, is there like the thing? Like,
everything. Everything. Well, I mean, so we've got Cisco around here. We've got EMC. Cumulus Networks has one of their offices here. So Cumulus Networks is big into SD-WAN. So they have their whole Cumulus Linux that runs on white box switches and everything. So like all kinds of stuff. So you can get a job in programming. Because IBM has support structure here, and they have a lot of products. So you can code for a product. Startups pop up around here. People building apps for whatever. Virtually any type of technology position that you could want. RTP is like the Silicon Valley of the East Coast, essentially. I mean, because we have so many different. It's all sexy, It's all there. I mean, whatever kind of technology you're wanting to work with, I mean, it's here.
Okay. So let's see. Okay, so then you were the instructor for Durham Public School. So then how did you go from there to CSC? And then that's curious. Okay, so you were a network engineer at AT&T, and then you were a senior network engineer at CSC.
Yes.
How did you get that senior?
Because that was the position I was hired for.
So is there something I am senior?
Okay, so the senior designation, I always think it's kind of funny. It's a lot of companies use it as like a pay level type thing. Grade, not so much a designation of your experience or how good you are. I would not say that I was that good for the senior designation at that point in time. But the it was the pay level essentially that did it. And so for what I was making, it was considered senior level, and so that's the designation that I had. That was a strange job to start off with. Because I was doing a lot of analytics, utilizing NetFlow and stuff like that, network monitoring. I came up with some automation tasks to kind of streamline that process for like security things, and also monitoring bandwidth usage, make sure there weren't people doing things on the network they weren't supposed to be doing, like streaming games was a huge thing. Expect now it's March Madness. Lots of companies are probably having problems right now because there's games on and they're like, the internet's down. No, it's just everyone's streaming a game. So stuff like that, and it migrated from there to where I had a wider range of responsibilities. But what got me in the door was that particular function, utilizing NetFlow and doing the analytics portion. So I needed a job.
You needed that.
I needed a job.
The next,
and that's kind of what made me go, okay, I need to work. I need something steady. And that's the way it works sometimes. Sometimes you just need that paycheck, and it may not be the ideal job, but it may be the job that gets you the job that you want. A lot of people are like, oh, well, no, that's not the job that I want to do right now. And it's like, okay, well, no, see, you're focusing on the job that you want after this job, but you need the job that you have to have right now to get the job that you want. Yeah. So and then that was just kind of thing. But because of how good I was, I streamlined the process so much that what used to take me 8 hours of work that I'd come in, I'd start correlating all the data, would take me all day. Yeah. Within a few months, I got it down to, it was just a couple hours of work. And then I would add the data that I would collect throughout the rest of the day to a final report that compiled in like 15 minutes. Yeah. So then all of a sudden I have, hours in the rest of the day that I'm like, give me something else to do. Yeah. And so I started on taking on more responsibility. And that's where I got into a lot of systems work. Was doing DNS administration, IPAM stuff, some more security functions, working with WAN acceleration and switches, in the EPA's network, and IPv6. Yeah. Oh, this was around about the time that the mandate came down from the government that at least portions of the networks had to be IPv6 compatible. Yeah. You could dual stack. With both 4 and 6, but IPv6 had to be there. Yeah. So I got introduced to IPv6 and started working with that. So a lot of good things came from, because I was willing to take the job that I didn't necessarily want, but I got a lot of cool exposure that I wouldn't have otherwise had if I'd turned my nose up at it. So.
Well, with that, I mean, were you just in a position because you walked from the other job? Is there something that you could have done where you think you would have had more options? You wouldn't be stuck with one option? Or is it just kind of the economy at the time? Because it was 2010.
Yeah, I mean, the economy was still kind of tanked. Yeah. I'm sure I probably didn't have a glowing recommendation. If anybody called so I had talked to the technology director, who was one of my main interfaces at Durham Public Schools. Yeah, the principal was technically my boss, but I had a lot of connection with the technology director. And I told him my reasoning for leaving. And a lot of time I would put him and her down. That way there would be kind of a balanced view. Yeah. I don't know. I just felt so strongly about it that I don't think I could have done anything differently, from what I did. I mean, you do what you got to do sometimes. So.
So I guess that's when you bring up recommendations. So everybody always asks for recommendations, and then I always hate it because I spend like 3 days trying to figure out the perfect recommendation, and then nobody ever calls.
Yeah.
Do you call? Like, have you found people call recommendations?
Sometimes. So we live in a different day and age than what it was, 15, 20 years ago when people had the reference sheet that was part and parcel of their resume. Yeah. And then, you were allowed, if somebody was a scumbag employee, you could say they're a scumbag. Nowadays, though, I think there's a lot of laws on the books, or been changes or something like that, I think, where all anybody can ever, because I think what had happened is there's probably a lot of lawsuits involved somewhere along the way, where, somebody actually gave a false reference saying that they were bad when in fact there was nothing wrong with them, and they figured out, and then somebody sued somebody else, and whatever. So I think I don't know if there's not a law. A lot of company policy now says that we can verify their employment. We can't give any character statements now. So a lot of times you have to find someone that is willing to actually say things. So if you are going to rely on recommendations, which it's still a thing, some companies do actually check it. Talk to the person before you write them down, even though if they were your last manager or somebody that you worked with or anything like that. Talk to them. Tell them that you're going to be using them as a reference. Make sure you have a good rapport with them before you put them down. Obviously you don't want somebody that's just going to say whatever you tell them to say, but because that's dishonest on a whole other level. But have someone that's actually going to speak testament to the type of engineer that you are. whether it's you're a lazy engineer,
Yeah.
you know, but a lot of innovation has come about from laziness. So, but just, be careful who you write down. Just because it asks for references or anything, I don't think you necessarily have to put down your last, manager or last boss. A lot of times it can be somebody that you worked with. So.
Okay. So then you were only there for 10 months. It says on your resume.
Oh, the CSC thing.
CSC, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what happened there is actually I was in the same position.
Yeah.
Another company won the contract that we were on.
Oh, weird.
From the EPA, so
Yeah.
I switched companies. So I was actually a contractor to CSC, who was a contractor to the EPA. So I was a subcontractor through a company called DISYS.
Yeah.
And then CGI Federal came in, won the contract that CSC was on, and took some of the people and made them full-time employees. Okay. So then I started working for CGI Federal.
Okay.
And I was doing it was the exact same thing.
So that's curious. I mean, did you run into any weird? Because you don't think about another company basically kind of.
Well, no, in situations like this with the government contracts and stuff, that happens a whole lot.
Really?
They move in because all right, they bid on the same contract that this other company had been in and everything, but they don't have that foundational knowledge, right? So what happens is they'll take some of the key employees, they'll bring in their own people, but they take some of the key employees and pull them into their organization. That way they have that foundational knowledge there.
Okay.
And
So do you have to go through the entire renegotiation process, or do they normally take you as is?
This was an interesting situation. They interviewed, so they came in and they interviewed everybody that worked there, with the exception of the CSC managers who chose not to be interviewed. Right. No. Some of the managers wanted to stay with CSC, so they're like, I'm not coming to your interview. So they interviewed all the people. They asked what your position was, what it is that you did, what systems you were familiar with, those types of things. And I got brought in, and the next week they had a bunch of folders. They walked into the office, they had a bunch of folders and with people's names on them, and they handed them out to everybody. And inside mine was an offer letter, right? And this was the first time that I actually had a pay reduction. But so it was weird though. But I had better benefits, right? There was some additional benefits. Their health care was a bit better than what I was getting. They had like some employee stock purchase plans. The 401k was better and stuff like that. But I'd never, even in moves like that, because at AT&T I was a contractor to start with, and then I got brought on FTE. I had better benefits and an increase in pay there. So I had never experienced this flip over before where I'm getting paid less, and they were like, yeah, well, based on this formula that we have, this is where we feel that you're at. But the position that I was at was senior network engineer, right? And I'm like, some of the other guys that I know were listed as senior network engineers aren't getting paid. A lot of it had to do because of their formulas and everything, and the fact that I wasn't carrying an active certification and all that, and because I wasn't in a specialized spot. So because of what I'd been doing there, I was spread out in a lot of areas. So I touched on a lot of different things that we had like a couple guys that were just route switch, and we had a whole security team, and then we had the systems guy, and I was supposed to be. They weren't bringing over the main systems guy. I was coming over to do the DN. I was going to be the main DNS administrator. So I was the guy that was actually listed on whenever you looked up EPA.gov. My name was under the DNS administrator. But so I was the DNS administrator, IPAM, all of those servers, in addition to all these other things that I was doing too, WAN acceleration, the analytics stuff, and it was a weird experience for me.
Did you think about did you think about staying with CSC? Was it even an option? Was it like take less pay or get laid off, or did you have the option to stay with CSC?
CSC was looking for positions for other people if they wanted them, but they weren't guaranteeing anything. Now they guaranteed it for a few people because they immediately had openings with other contracts that they had, but not everybody had a guarantee. They would be like, look, we're going to keep looking to find a position for you, but we obviously can't keep paying you while you're not doing anything. So if you want to go home and wait until we give you a call that we have something for you, that was an option. And that's the reason why I rolled it. And I didn't like lose a lot, but it was, it was a few $1,000s less than what, and I was like, this is weird. It was kind of weird.
So did you, like with the IT department, like with a lot of IT departments, it's almost funny, like I have to remind so many geeks like that they are actually part of a business.
Yeah.
Like they think like the server room is somehow the entire world, right? So when you're working on these federal contracts, do you guys realize these contract negotiations are coming up? Do you get blindsided by this, or is this something that just if you're in that environment, you understand?
You know that these things are happening.
Okay,
you hear about them as they're coming along. There's memos that go out. Typically from our point of view, we knew that CGI and some of the other companies that were competing for the contract were coming to the facility where we were located at because they were telling us to cover stuff up, so that way they couldn't get an idea of what was going on before going in there to talk about that. So
So you were there then. So you were there for about 2 years, and then you went over to. It's so funny, the names of these damn companies. STS. So what is STS International?
STS was a contractor to Cisco. So I was actually, I worked at Cisco, at the Cisco offices, doing implementations for Cisco offices. That was an interesting job. So we worked for Cisco. In Cisco offices, North and South America. So if they had to upgrade the switches, they had to upgrade the routers on site, install UCS servers or any of this other stuff, right? We would get sent on site and do all the new config, new phones, new APs, whatever needed to be done, and do all. So that was awesome, right? My fourth child was born right about the time I started this job. So that part was not very cool. My wife was very unhappy about that, and that's actually what caused me to leave that position, just because the amount of travel that was involved with it. Because basically what would happen is once a quarter, at the beginning of the quarter, we would be handed a list of sites. They would get a list from Cisco operations, say these are all the sites that need to be checked if they're in spec and best practices and all the stuff like that. So then they would divvy up those sites for each of the engineers, and we would run these things through scripts that had been developed to check, iOS version and equipment, and make sure everything was current best practice, current generation hardware and all this other stuff. And if it wasn't, then we had to make the determination, was this something that we could do remotely, or is this something we have to go on site for? Obviously, if it's a hardware replacement, we have to go on site for it. So then we would have to schedule out and everything for that particular quarter, all the work we do. And sometimes you got lucky and you only had like 2 hits out of a list of 15 sites that needed changes. Sometimes you got very unlucky and you had like 10 hits on groups of 15, and then you were traveling a whole lot, and So, but it was very cool just because I was at Cisco in that environment, getting exposure to all of their newer stuff. Because a lot of companies tend to hold on to their old equipment as long as they possibly can, let it depreciate completely, and then they'll go ahead and upgrade. So you might get 2-3 model year or models behind, and not with Cisco. They want latest and greatest at their stuff. So
did you run into any weird issues? Because I've heard that with like these contracting companies that work with the major tech companies, and then especially with laws and employment stuff nowadays, it can actually be a really weird, like Microsoft, oddly enough, it was so horrible. Microsoft got sued for treating their subcontractors too well. Like because the subcontractors got invited to the Christmas party, that then meant they were actually and like they literally got sued because they were trying to treat their subcontractors nice. So like, was there any weird?
Well, Cisco had a very good relationship with STS,
Okay.
So STS had gone through multiple acquisitions from different companies at different times.
Yeah.
So the original company, I don't even remember the name of what the company was, but that had been doing this implementation stuff. A lot of these guys had been there, or like three of the senior guys. One was she was a project manager, and two of the other ones were engineers. They had been there for years and working with the company under different names, but somebody just kind of swooped in and bought them and, didn't really do anything with them because they were at Cisco and there's like whatever, right? It was just kind of a branch that existed. It was a good relationship that this company, because a lot of the upper management stayed in place, so they managed to keep that. Yeah. What the problems we ran into is the travel, right?
Okay.
That was the biggest issue, because you had to get proper visas and so, because it was North and South America, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So and they actually had an office over in Europe. STS did, that was at Cisco offices over there in Europe, that they covered the European region, and there was the ASPAC region and everything that did the same thing. And you run into a lot of problems sometimes with the visas, like NAFTA.
Like that, like
well, no, you know the North American Free Trade Agreement.
That's why I was like, what? Where?
So a key part of NAFTA was like for the Canadians, companies can't bring in non-Canadian citizens to do work that Canadian citizens could do unless they have a very valid reason. So since we're American citizens coming up to a Cisco office to do installs for Cisco equipment on Canadian soil, why can't a Canadian do it? Why does it have to be an American to do it?
Yeah.
So I was actually kicked out of Canada once.
You were kicked out of Canada?
I was kicked out of Canada.
Really?
They were very polite about it.
Very polite. Get out. Get out.
We were going up to do to check on some stuff. And there was a project manager that was new at the company that had never traveled to any sites before. And he had came with me, to go on one site install to get a feel for how it worked and everything. And he started going on and on about how we were going to be installing all this equipment and stuff. And I was already, I was through, I'd been stamped and everything. I was getting ready to walk out the door, and the guy waves at me and says, "Hey, wait for me," because he's going for a second check to talk to the immigration officials. And the immigration guy that was at the door was like, "You're with him?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, I got one hand on the door about to walk out so I could go grab my stuff. And they're like, "Well, you need to go back there with him as well then." And I'm over here going, "No, we're just here for meetings and everything." But he's going on about, installs and all this other stuff. And we weren't even at that point yet, right? As far as doing installs and whatnot, we weren't at that point of the project yet. He was just supposed to be getting experience for how projects progressed, right? And of course, have a reason to travel a little bit. Everybody wants to travel for their job sometimes. So that was just extra justification. But yeah, so he was going on about how we were going to be doing that and stuff, and it just turned into this fiasco.
Oh my God! So the lesson is you're just doing meetings.
Yeah, meetings. It's all meetings.
It's all meetings. Oh, weird. So that's curious. So your company didn't just set all that up. I would have figured the visas, especially if you deal with that a lot.
So it's possible to get it done and everything. It's just so much of a headache to go through that portion that they kind of say if we don't have time to get that part, because it's a basis by basis type thing, and if you're supposed to be doing these things quarterly and it takes 3-4 months to work out the paperwork or whatever, it's like, well, we can't do this every time we have to go to Canada.
Really? So there's not just some kind of like just ongoing visa? I would just think you'd have like a 10-year.
No.
Really?
It's because of the NAFTA agreement. You have to have, there's like some kind of form that's involved that has to be approved by Canadian officials and U.S. officials and different companies and all kind of, I did not want to get into that whole.
So what happens with it? I mean, so do you still have to pay your airfare back? I mean, do they just say no and then you've got to pay or I guess the company pays the flight back?
Yeah, well, so they gave me the option at the window. They're like, all right, so it's Friday, right? And they were like, so you can have a hearing if you want to. If you want to try to appeal this decision, not to let you into Canada, and but that hearing won't be until Monday, and you'll have to stay here. And there were little areas with bars and stuff, and
Really?
I don't know for sure that that's where I would have been staying at, but it could have been that they just walked us past there just to show them to us.
Yeah.
But they walked us back to the waiting room, then no charge for the flight back into the States. From there, we had to reshuffle all of our tickets and everything and get stuff redone. I think we flew into Buffalo, I think.
So they just fly you to Buffalo. And
Yeah, they
stuck in
flew,
Buffalo.
and you were responsible for everything else. So yeah,
Really?
I was kicked out of Canada.
Kicked out. That's impressive. Oh, hey.
I know. How many people do you know that have been kicked out of Canada?
Apparently. All right. So then you go over, and so you're a senior. So this says you're an implementation engineer, because it's
Yes.
curious, because a lot of new people, again, they see all these titles. And
Uh-huh.
again, at a certain point, you're like, does an implementation engineer, is that actually something, or again, is that just HR?
Yeah. So, all right. We focus solely on implementation. So a lot of the design work and stuff like that was already done. Okay. So we focus solely on implementations, getting the things up and running, dealing with problems that came up. Because every time that you're turning on new equipment, you might have this static config where you just got to change a few items for whatever reason. The gremlins always like to rear their head, and so you're doing that particular portion of the work, and something always goes wrong. So obviously you just can't throw all the stuff onto the machines and ship it out there and expect it to work every single time. So we focused purely on implementations. We did first day support, and then after that we were done. Everything moved over to Cisco operations, and they monitored the equipment and dealt with any faults after that point. But as long as everything was good day zero, we were done. So that we focus solely on new stuff. So that's what implementation engineers do. They do new equipment and whatnot. So yes, that is a thing for a lot of a lot of these other vendors and stuff. They have implementation engineers. So if a company buys a new kind of product, or whatever, and they need those sales engineers or whatever, they might have implementation engineers that work for them that come in, do the new implementation to get everything up and running the way it's supposed to, and then they're done, and everything else is left up to you. So it is a viable track for your career, and it's a good way to get introduced to a lot of different technology and stuff too. If you're willing to go that route, a lot of travel involved in most of those roles.
So flying out of like Raleigh, I would think this was a great place to fly out of.
Oh yeah, you can connect. Yeah, they do a lot of flights, a lot of connecting flights and stuff from there. A lot of places you can get direct flight. Plus, I mean, Atlanta is just a short hop away, and from Atlanta you can, or DFW, you can fly anywhere. So
interesting. So then we went from there to senior network engineer, Millennium Consulting.
Yes.
And so what is?
So I worked for EMC.
EMC, okay.
Yes. That was a contract position for EMC. Fantastic job.
Really?
Yes. I got to work in their data center. So they have a center of excellence located here that has one of their main data centers. That houses a lot of different equipment. And so I got to work on that, but I also they have actually 3 locations in the Triangle area. They have a manufacturing facility out in Apex, and then they have a center down TW Alexander, just right around there. That direction, like, everybody that's watching the camera is somewhere over there. Which way is he facing so we can find it? So, and then they have the Center of Excellence, which is their big data center. It was very cool because I got to work in the data center, but I also got to work on their facility stuff as well, and touching a lot of different moving parts, doing upgrades for stuff. I actually got to do the vlab reimagining, essentially. So EMC has this demo lab that they call vlab, that customers can log into it. It's a virtualized thing, and build up stacks of EMC equipment to kind of virtualize the environment and check stuff out. And they always show up at the new iteration of it shows up at EMC World every year. And it gets a lot of traffic during EMC World. And every other year, they had tons of problems with vlab not working. And it was because of the way that they were trying to put it together. It was all cobbled together and things didn't fit right. And they didn't migrate things well. So I came up with this whole modular design for it and said, this is the way that you need to build it. And it was a huge success. They had absolutely zero trouble from the time that they turned it on. No downtime. Everybody could get into it. It was scaled out to like 32,000 customers could use it. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was that right there was kind of a career-changing experience for me.
Why was that?
Well, because to this point, I had kind of dealt in a lot of different areas and dealing with some system stuff, some network stuff, some voice stuff, and everything like that. But I'd never done anything that really kind of put everything together, right? With the way vlab had to be done, I had to understand all the different portions and how they all fit together to come up with this design, right? And it clicked something in my head. And this is the way that we should be looking at networking, as this whole environment as opposed to these components, because the system guys always want to do the systems, this is my stuff, storage, this is my stuff, virtualization, my stuff, network, this is my stuff, there's a definitive end and beginning of everybody's coverage, and and you need this holistic view of the network to really understand and implement the solutions that, because regardless, everybody has a customer, right? So obviously as a network engineer, my customer are the end users or whoever's using my network, right? And you have to understand that customer's needs. And if you don't understand the customer's needs, you can't put out the best solution for them. Obviously, and networking is not a one-size-fits-all thing at all. A lot of companies try to take that approach for that one-size-fits-all. We're just going to slam a bunch of this equipment in here, put VLANs on all the ports for different stuff, and here you go. Do whatever you need to do, and sure, it can work in a brute force type method. But is it classy? Is it sexy? No, it's not. And I like these more streamlined things that work the way they're supposed to work, and there's no kludginess about it. So so I think that was kind of a definitive change moment in my career, where I started taking this more holistic view of networking, and then I was working with somebody there that really started hammering into my mind how I need to approach my career, because I had loved technology so much, and I kept up to date, and I liked working with it and everything, but I'd never, for some reason, I never really put the connection between the whole career in networking, a career engineer, as opposed to just a job to job, and I made that connection because of his influence, and then my view of how I did the network. I was like, I should start looking at things in a different way, and I, not to brag, but I really took off as an engineer from there. I became a better engineer because of that.
So then how did you actually get that project? So you go in there and that's okay. So once it's done, it's dealing with 32,000 people. That's really impressive. But the question is who went, oh yeah, you do that.
I had the cycles.
Yeah.
Well, they were expecting, they just wanted somebody to do, we need some of the switches and other parts of the infrastructure, reconfigured or added and racked and done up, right? Yeah. And okay, I was looking at it, but they were having so many problems with the previous iteration, because I started talking to some of the systems guys and the other guys that were on the project, and the project manager that was in charge of it. Yeah. I was listening in on these calls, and I was hearing all these previous problems. Well, we want to keep, we don't want to have the problem that we had last year or the year before that with this and that and that. And I started thinking, but I had the cycles, and I was there on-site resource, so they gave it to me. But I started hearing these things, and I was like, there might be a better way. So I started looking at the old infrastructure and what they want to do with the new stuff. And I'm like, no, we need to do this instead. And like I said, I came up with this modular design where it's just the addition of these certain basic components added in, as opposed to ripping out all the old stuff and putting in new stuff, or kludging the stuff together with makeshift parts that don't really fit together. Like what they were trying to do before. And I was like, if you stick with these systems or the latest iteration of these systems and these basic configs, you don't have to do all these fancy things. This is a graceful, basic, simple way to do this. And it worked fantastically for them.
But I guess that's the thing, like with the politics involved, did you go in with just a book of documentation? Was it just so eloquent? Was it poetry when you said it?
Well, actually, funny you should mention it. It was. It was eloquent to the point where everybody was. It was like one of those. Have you ever talked to somebody about a problem that you have, and all of a sudden they have some kind of insight, and you're like, why didn't we ever do this before? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what it was. I spoke up in the middle of a call, because I was just a contractor. Right? I wasn't an EMC employee, but I was the on-site resource. Nobody expected this guy who was just supposed to be putting this equipment in and doing some configurations to say, hey, why don't we do this? And that's what happened. And they were like, that makes a lot of sense. And so I started talking to the systems guys and the other programmers that were involved with it, and they were like, yeah, this is going to work. And we implemented it. They tested it. Had the only problems that they had were unrelated from the network. It was just with the storage systems talking with the virtualization systems. So that was, and I'm like, okay, I'm not quite there yet to fix that problem for you guys. So they and somebody at EMC thought it was good, because I got a bonus check. As a contract, and that's really, so a lot of companies do these incentive programs and stuff like that, where somebody does a good job, they can put you in for, a little small bonus check depending on how good a job, like a $500, $1,000, or two, top gold, platinum, whatever, job, $2,000, and contractors never get those things. It's always employees recommending other employees and stuff. I was put in for the top level prize or compensation or whatever for how well of a job that I did making vlab what it was, and from a VP no less that was associated with the project. So I was pretty pumped about that.
That's cool. So you kind of got help with, I guess, what you would call a mentor then, when you were with this person that helped you kind of rethink about how your career was going.
Yes.
So one of the big questions that always comes up is like, how do you get a mentor? Can you get a mentor, or is it just like somebody walks in and goes, I like the look of you?
Yeah, dude, Mr. Miyagi. Find your Mr. Miyagi.
Can you find, or do you find Miyagi, or does Miyagi find you?
It's different for everybody. Sometimes there is somebody out there that is looking for that person to pass knowledge on to. Sometimes you are that person that just loves to teach and is willing to take anybody who's willing to listen to you. You have to be willing to be mentored. You may not realize that you're willing to be mentored, but some part of you has to be willing to be mentored. a lot of it was. And I'll tell the story. So, and at the job, part of the stuff that I was supposed to do. So EMC had VCE. I don't know whether you're familiar. VCE was a collaboration between Cisco and EMC. And EMC had completely taken over VCE, and they had brought over some guys, and me and another guy who was a contractor were supposed to be learning about this network, the VCE network and everything, so we could help support it. Because VCE has a local office as well. And so we were talking with the two guys that were in charge of the VCE network, and they were trying to tell us all this stuff, and I'm on my computer or on my phone, right? Because my boss, so the other guy was kind of a security guy, and he had a different boss or manager from me, but because I was covering all these different locations, he was constantly asking me stuff or wanting me to check things out. So I was getting emails or text messages from him that he wanted me to go check the stuff, and I'm supposed to be learning about this, and I'm like, well, I'm doing this class. You want me to do it now? Yeah, go ahead and do it now. So I would get up and so over the course of like a week and a half, we were supposed to learn. I was constantly like getting up and leaving the building and going to another site, and then calling and say, hey, sorry, I left. They thought I was a scumbag, because I wasn't paying attention or I wasn't vested in it or anything like that. And it wasn't a matter of that, it was a matter that I was vested. I wanted to know, but I was being pulled in different directions about things. And one of those guys was the guy who ended up being my mentor career-wise was one of the VCE guys. So for months that he didn't want anything to do. He's like, oh, I got to do something with him. Once he actually got into a project with me, though, where we were working side by side, he realized what was going on, that I was being drawn in a bunch of different directions, and that the other guy was only listening because he wanted to take. He had nothing to give, right? He was a taker. And you run into guys like that are willing to listen, but they are not willing to offer anything up or assist in any way or anything like that. And so he realized that I was not a scumbag and started, helping me in different things. Not only, technology-wise, because he did very solid Cisco knowledge and just networking knowledge in general, but contacts and career advice and stuff like that. And so I learned a whole lot from him. He really did help me out. So I mean, you have to be willing to kind of place yourself under someone else and listen to them, because that's kind of a vulnerable position. A mentor-mentee relationship is it's completely different from a friendship. So you have to be willing to enter into that type of a relationship.
Have you had many mentors, do you figure, through your career?
No. He was really the first one. A lot of the stuff, I had associates that kind of did some knowledge share if I had questions about some things. I had one guy over at the EPA shared a lot of systems knowledge with me. Would I necessarily say he's a mentor? Sorta. He gave me some good advice about some things here and there, but I wouldn't necessarily say he was like at that super mentor status, maybe like entry-level mentor. But the other guy though, he was definitely a mentor, and I still talk to him, today and everything. It's been a few years, but anytime I got a question or anything like that, although I'm getting closer to his level.
So did you ever run into problems? Like, one of the issues that I see with people when they get mentors is they don't necessarily realize a mentor isn't necessarily a friend. Did you ever run into problems like with boundary issues, where you start to become so comfortable that you kind of forget, no, that's Miyagi?
No. Well, so my mentor, I also count him as a friend. We're friendly with each other. We know about each other's families and stuff, and we share. We talk about our kids and all the other stuff. So sometimes though, yes, I've seen other people where they have a mentor, but I mean, it's definitely. I am not your friend. I will smite thee if you cross me at all. So I think you have to be mindful of what type of person you're dealing with.
Okay. So this was like the most amazing, wonderful, greatest job in the world, and you leave it after a year. Like,
Yes.
Why, that seems odd. Like, because you can even see, you're so smiling and had like, and then it's only been a year.
There were some politics involved.
Okay,
So I was a contractor, right?
Yeah.
My boss was trying to work me in as a FTE, trying to find some way to bring me in to the EMC family. He was doing everything that he could. Unfortunately, there was an incident where some people took some switches off the loading dock that we were going to be using for a project.
Okay.
And it turns out that they thought those were just scrap switches that they could use somewhere else, but they took them, and we found out who took them from security, because security let us see the video footage, right? So we knew who it was, but we wanted to give them time because we didn't know why they took them. We email blasted the facility, right, saying, you took switches off. You took switches off the dock. We need them back. They're for a project. Just return them to the dock.
Okay.
We have you on security video, so we know who it is.
Yeah.
But just return them. That's all we want, and nothing else will happen, right? We told our boss what was going on and everything. Our manager was actually based up in Boston, and the guy emailed, and said, "Oh, sorry, I thought they were scrap and everything. I'm taking them back," right? So he took them back, and we thought that was it. Well, I'm the one who sent the email out, right? We both signed our names on it, but it came from my account. He was an EMC employee, the other guy was, and I was just a contractor. And suffice to say, HR got involved. The local HR manager, I don't know what it was, took a great dislike, saying, you can't do that. You can't utilize this email because it was one of the email lists, right, that blasted everybody in the facility. You can't do that with that email list. It's improper use and yada, yada, yada. And she started talking to the director of the facility and, started getting involved, and he was talking to the director up there that my manager worked for. And suffice to say, what it boiled down to is I'd already interviewed for a full-time position there, and they were in the process of working out the salary and all this stuff like that. I was gonna get an offer letter. I mean, and they yanked it. They said we can't do anything right now. And this was like 4 months before the contract was supposed to be renewed. And I talked to my manager. My manager told me what was going on, and he was like, "It's politics. I can't do anything right now. We kind of need to let this blow over." But good news is we got the contract renewed, right? So you've got that going. It was renewed for another year. Well, turns out that I got blackballed. The HR manager said that they would not release the funds for the contract if I was still associated with it. I have no clue what I ever did to this person that caused them to revile me the way that they did. Absolutely, I'm still baffled by it, but it was the absolute best thing that ever happened to me.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Hands down, the best thing. Well, outside of my wife and kids, obviously. Job-wise, it was, because this is what happened. It forced me to go out and look for another position, and utilizing, some of my contacts and everything, and then some of my mentors' contacts, came upon this job with Unicom Systems. Doing the consulting thing. I could not be happier where I'm at. I mean, the EMC job was cool. I learned some very cool things. Got my mentor there and everything else. But this job at Unicom is absolutely fantastic.
Really?
It is. I mean, I get to play with so many different systems in a bunch of different customers' environments. I could be on Juniper one day, Cisco the next, doing wireless, doing voice, doing who knows what. I have the time that I need to do for research, staying up to date on technology. It's gotten me into blogging big. I write for Tech Target now and network computing. I mean, this has really kind of, you know, blown up my career in a way that was inconceivable to me, you know, just a few years ago. So, getting blackballed was the best thing that ever happened.
So with that, with HR, well, I guess you're a contractor.
Yeah.
Because normally if you're an employee, at least they have to give you half a decent reason.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even imagine, like, literally.
They had to give absolutely nothing. All I knew is I could not be associated with the contract to get the money, the funds released for them to keep somebody in that spot. So they had to.
And so there was no.
There was absolutely there was no. My boss told me what was going on on the outside. You know, I had a phone call with him, and he was like,
But
my hands are tied.
But that doesn't even make sense. Like normally, frankly, I normally side with the boss. But
well,
like, at least what you're saying, like, you normally that doesn't even.
Yeah. So it came down to, you know, kind of two directors, you know, level individuals vying with each other, and who knows, maybe this HR person knew where some bodies were buried. You know, I don't know. But yeah. So suffice to say, I was not welcome there anymore, and everybody involved in the facility that I've been working with for the past year, they were baffled as well. They were like, we don't understand what's going on, but you let us know if we can do absolutely anything. And I still have, you know, good relationships with them as well. So I mean, it was just one of those weird things that there's no indication, no understanding. It just happened.
So would the advice that you give is, if you are a contractor, to stay out of anything that might be political?
Yes.
Okay.
If it is political or it could be construed as political, you know, office politics, not political. But in any way, shape, or form, stay out of it. Do your job. If you are a contractor, just sit there and do your job. You can offer input on projects and stuff like that, but overall, you should just sit there and keep your mouth shut.
So you've been bouncing around a lot, but then I guess it kind of goes back to that whole AT&T question. So you've been with this place a year and a half. Is this your forever job, or in another year?
I think it might be.
You might bounce.
Yeah, I mean, as long as things keep in the vein that they are, I'm happy to spend my next 20 years there. I mean, that's how excited I am. I have an excellent manager, who's very understanding about, you know, my needs as far as, you know, work-life balance go. He's very understanding as far as, you know, my driving desire to stay up to date on technology. You know, he fosters that, and I mean, it's just I can't read how fantastic it is, the position that I have now. It's awesome. I mean, I'm very, very excited to be where I'm at.
So you're about 35 at this point. You've got more or less, if you take the military and 15 years experience. So where do you figure your career goes? Because I always say, there's a really snotty person that once said to me, like with me doing YouTube videos, it's like, so those who can do and those who can't teach, you know, what's a YouTuber? At which point I just walked away because somebody about to smack you.
Yeah.
But like, so for you, and one of the things that I always tell people is, like, for me, I could go out and I could be building a lot of this stuff. You just get to a certain age, you just get tired of getting called at midnight. You get tired of the stress. So for you, you're still 5 years younger than me. But like, where do you think your career will go? Are you somebody that wants to get your hands dirty, your career?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I obviously I can't tell you where, you know, exactly I'll be in another 10 years, another 15 years or something. Yeah. I just know I want to be working with technology. You know, networking stuff. I think it's so cool. I mean, I think that's one of the key things, that if you want to be a successful engineer, love the technology. Really, I mean, you can be a good engineer and just kind of work your way through it, you know. But is that fun? No, it's not. You know, but if you want to be a successful engineer, you got to love the technology like it's one of your kids.
Yeah.
You know, and I've always retained that love.
Okay.
You know, ever since I sat down in front of a computer whenever I was a kid for the first time, and then you know, a couple of years after that, my dad logged me into AOL. You know, and I was like, whoa, I'm talking to somebody that's like halfway across the country. How does this work? And so I started reading books on it. I've retained that love and desire to understand how technology works, and it's cool. And so I don't know where I'll be. I know I'll be working. Do I mind getting my hands dirty? No. Yeah. I don't. I mean, there's always going to be, you will never be too good of an engineer to rack and stack your own equipment, all right? If you ever get to the point where you think you're too good of an engineer to rack and stack your equipment, you need to reevaluate things. I've got a story about that, but I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, you're never too good of an engineer to rack and stack your own stuff. So anyone who tells you that they are is a fool. So if that's what it takes, I just want to continue to work with the equipment. That's the technology. That's the key thing for me.
So do you see though, because that's one of the issues, like I have a lot of like older folks that contact me, again, they want to get their hands dirty. And I tell them, man, you're getting close to 50 and you say you want to get your hands dirty. Like, you know, there's like, why? What's wrong with you? So like in your field, do you see 50-year-olds getting their hands dirty, racking and stacking?
Well, all right, so racking and stacking, you know, equipment has gotten progressively smaller, with the exception, you know, in a few cases. But you know, we had some data center guys that were the technicians over at EMC, and they were older gentlemen. You know, I'm not going to say they're like super old or anything, but I mean they were silver-maned foxes. How about that? If they see this, they'll know who I'm talking about. And that's what they did. They ran cable and fiber, and they racked and stacked the equipment for us, and if we put in a request, But I mean, then that's what they did. I don't think so. I mean, obviously you're not going to be a 70 or 75-year-old racking and stacking equipment. But you know, if you're just having to rack stuff up, now I will say cable running is probably a young man's game, especially when you're dealing with crawl spaces or plenums and stuff like that. You know, I even now I don't think I would want to be crawling around in those if I didn't have to. So it happens on occasion that I have to, but I mean, I could see myself being 50 years old and doing that, you know. Okay.
So what about, because we talked about the young people going into it, and again, I have a lot of people retraining. Again, they're 40. So they're 40 years old. They come here to deliver pizzas, get into the IT world. Again, would you advise them to start with technical support?
Yes. Really? I mean, this technical support, first and foremost, is the best way to get, you know, introduced to the stuff. You know, if you're taking classes on the side or you got your certification or whatever, okay, that's fine and dandy. But you need some way to get hands-on. And again, technical support is drudgery. All right, nobody likes being level 1 support. I know I have met absolutely, you know, I think maybe 2 people in my life who actually enjoy being, you know, level 1 support. And so no one wants to do it long term, but it's a fine way to get experience and exposure and everything else. So whether it's you're going in being the technician that's running the cables and getting just familiar with the physicality of the equipment, right? Not so much the command line, but just how everything connects together. Do that if that's what you have to do. Do the level 1 support for a year or 2, you know, if you have to. But you need some way to get your foot into the door in the industry. You know, and so you do what I mean, it's just like, you know, the actors out in LA or whatever, if they have to do a hemorrhoids commercial to break in and get that Screen Actors Guild, you know, membership, then I guess that's what they have to do. You know, of course their face is plastered all over, they're associated with hemorrhoids now, but this too shall pass, you know.
All right. So then you're talking about, so now you're doing your thing, you're doing all of that, and then you're talking about writing. So you write for Packet Pusher's blog and Tech Target. So is that pomp and circumstance? Is that actually good for your career? Does that actually pay you any money that you care about?
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily care about.
Pay for a vacation?
Yeah, it can pay for a vacation. Packet Pushers doesn't. Packet Pushers, they have a community blog section.
Okay.
Right, and actually, so last year,
Yep.
at the beginning of the year, toward maybe a month or two in, one of the guys in our office, who's actually leaving, but he's going to another company. But he's a V expert for VMware, right?
Oh, okay,
And how you get that designation is being a community contributor. And how he does that is he does blogs. He blogs a whole lot, right?
Oh, okay.
And he'd always been going on with it. And I've always enjoyed writing from whenever I was younger. I always thought blogs were maybe a little kind of silly. Because who really wants to read what I have to say about anything? So I wrote one. I did one blog post about something that we set up. We did an RTC server, real-time communications, so because we had this really bad snowstorm and ice storm that came through last year that shut down the triangle off and on, for at a time, a few days at a time. And so we were all stuck at home. So we were doing this stuff and we were trying to figure out a good way to communicate with each other instead of just doing email. So I'm like, hey, there's the open source RTC server, let's install this as a VM in our lab and we can all VPN in, and I'll make sure the lab firewall is set up to do split tunneling. That way we'll still keep doing our own internet connections, just everything else points back into the lab for the server or the resources and everything. They're like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. So we got that up and running. And it was an interesting experience trying to, get everything going between the two, because it took about a day and a half just because of how, like maybe someone had a power outage or something, or the internet went down for somebody else. You just try to get everything up and running, but by the time we got it up and running, it was like, oh yeah, great, So I wrote about the experience to start up the blog, and it's a dude on the net. .com. So there's one blog post there, one, and that was it. I didn't have the time, for it, and I was just, super busy. At the beginning of this year, I really started looking at my career, trying to figure out what would make me a better engineer. And not only that, but do I have anything to share or insights? Maybe I might have some valuable information, and I felt like I needed to give something back, like mentor-wise. And so Packet Pushers, for anyone who's not familiar, which I would think most people who would be watching this would be. But, you get a lot of good in-depth information about things. They do a lot of deep dives on technology and everything, but they don't, here and there's some mentoring articles that pop up from time to time. But and that's kind of the bent that I took there. And I wanted to kind of give some mentoring advice back. And the very first post that I did was about being a generalist as opposed to being a specialist. It's called Stop Being a Specialist. And that generated so much noise.
Really?
Yeah, there was a lot of people that went to me on Twitter or were mentioning it, and they talked about it in Reddit and other stuff like that. I was like, really? Okay, so it kind of resonated with some folks, and that's actually what caused TechTarget to contact me to see if I'd be willing to do a guest post. And they liked the guest post so much that they invited me to be a regular contributor. And then that spread out from just search SDN at TechTarget to search networking now. So I do posts for search networking as well. And I mean, it's really this was in January, and this has really snowballed for me. It's really weird. I'm really kind of shocked about how things took off. And it's an interesting experience, but I've found that it helps me to formulate my thoughts about things, and getting that information out there about just my, and look, outlooks, are a dime a dozen. You know, everybody's got an outlook, everybody's got an opinion about everything. You know, I'm just throwing my 2 cents into the mix. I hope it helps somebody, or at least, you know, makes somebody think about something harder. And even if they take a completely different stance from me, that's fine. At least they put the thought into it. And so I did realize that there is some value in doing that. So if it doesn't matter what you have to say, say it. You know, put it out there for the community at large. You know, you may not be welcomed. Not everybody may agree with you. They may think you're stupid or any of the above. But at least you had the cojones to go out and do it. You know, and because that's not everybody. Not everybody can actually go out and put words into a coherent thought and share it with everybody else. So if you've ever thought about doing it, do it, most definitely.
So with that, though, I mean, like the generalist for a specialist thing, I mean, it is interesting to talk about in this interview.
Yeah.
It's not exactly earth-shattering, though.
No, it's not. It's not earth-shattering, but you know, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the networking field in particular is so enamored with the specialist. We brought in a specialist. You know, I just, some people have probably heard that term, you know, before. You know, we're having some problems. We're going to bring in a specialist. You know, okay, granted, yes, and I think I said this earlier. You know, specialists are fine in some cases, but if you want your network to run in this just magical way, understanding all the key points, and that's really what I mean. It's okay to have a specialty. Something, everybody's going to have one area that they're better at than something else. But what I mean basically as the generalist is to have this holistic view, to understand the other components, even at a very basic level, is to mean that you can cater your services, you know, from a network viewpoint, as opposed to just expecting, look, I built the network, stuff runs over it. You know, if it doesn't work, it's your problem. I don't want nothing to do with it. Which you run into some of those guys from time to time. It's never the network. You know, it's absolutely never the network. And of course, 9 times out of 10, it's not the network. But you know, you understand what I'm saying. You know, and so that's what I mean by being a generalist, is understanding the other technology, even at a base level, will assist you in being a better network engineer. You know, and you know, on top of that, understanding coding, right? So that's a big thing in Python, right? Huge thing now, especially from an automation or a DevOps perspective and stuff like that. You know, so everybody wants to learn Python or Go or JavaScript or whatever. Learning how to code gives you a different mindset about things. It teaches you to think about and approach problems in a different manner than you would, you know. So I think that in turn makes you a better troubleshooter, you know. So these are skills that all build off of each other. So why would you want to forego that just because it belongs in a different arena than what you normally deal with? It doesn't make sense to me. If something, I have a motto or a mantra: be a better engineer by desire instead of by necessity. So that's kind of, you know, a thing that I told myself and I've taken to heart, and that's the basis that I try to operate off of.
But with the blog post and all that taking off, though, what I was kind of wondering is more, you know, there's 3 reasons it can happen. You know, either you're the big mouth that says what everybody already knows, but nobody for some reason will say it. Either that, or you're very eloquent. You very eloquently
I don't know
put
about
it,
that.
or you come at it with some slightly new arguments, like. And so I'm just wondering, like with your success.
I don't know. I have absolutely no clue whether it's the fact that I'm the big mouth that just says what everybody already knows, but I just said it louder, or I don't think it's because I'm eloquent. It might be, I don't know. I've been told I'm kind of funny. You know, I do. So I do take a slightly humorous bent with some of my packet pusher posts, but I like that. as far as new arguments, I tell it like it is. You know, if I see something that is in a particular way, I think, you know, I just say whatever it is. I don't frame it. I do formulate my ideas, you know, very easily. That may be what it is.
Okay.
I do have a tendency to speak in plainer terms than a lot of people do.
Okay.
Some people like that, you know, facet better. Just, yeah. Dropping all these technological, that's one thing I've seen with Tech Target is I'll put in, you know, an article and they go through and they'll expand some of the technological terms, or they'll add things in there, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'm not exactly that wordy or technology dropper, you know, type thing. You know, I kind of, you know, I'm not necessarily saying I want to operate or cater to the lowest denominator, but I want to be easy to understand the point I'm trying to convey. You know, so that's really what I'm looking, because an entry-level engineer or somebody who's trying to get into that, if I start talking about, you know, DMVPN and we're talking about a layer 3 VPN overlay and stuff, they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? I don't know. Yeah, and so I'm gonna say it in simpler terms, you know, so everybody, you know, granted that senior engineer that's been doing this stuff for 20 years might think I'm an idiot, but whatever. You know, at least everybody's gonna understand what I'm saying. So.
Okay. Cool. Well, coming close to the end, so I guess one of the questions I have then is, so with all of this, what is a technology that you're really excited about? What do you think is the technology for the next 5 years?
So much
So much,
technology. One of the things I'm excited about is SD-WAN, you know, kind of that component of SDN.
Okay. So what do you mean by SD? Because I know
okay,
SDN,
software defined.
It's
right?
Yeah, but what do you mean software-defined WAN?
Well,
isn't
so
that SDN? I mean, isn't that just another? Isn't that just another technology word?
Well, it is a technology word. So I'm so happy you asked. All right. So basically, what we're looking for is the ability to quickly and easily deploy branch offices. Right. So those smaller offices deploy the premise equipment or the edge equipment in a way so as to, you know, make it easier to open up offices, you know, easier to add technologies, add services, an easier way to control and reconfigure everything if you need to do that, an easier way to visualize your network, you know, and that's really what SD-WAN encompasses, software-defined WAN. Basically, what you get, and there's a few different companies doing it. Viptela, Cisco, they're doing it. Riverbed, Riverbed's getting into the game. Talari, Silver Peak, bunch of different people. So a lot of them are startups, because that's just the big thing. But the cool thing about it is, imagine, so before, if a company wanted to open up an office or needed to make changes to the edge equipment or whatever, they had to send an engineer out there. And the engineer had to come up with all this stuff and the configuration and schedule downtime and all these other things and plug it all up and do that. And you might be lucky to salvage, you know, a few hours out of an entire weekend. Now, with some of these technologies, you get what's called zero-touch deployments, right? Where you plug this device into the network, you turn it on, you plug it into whatever internet or connection that it has with, and it comes up and it goes out and finds its controller out in the cloud, you know, or wherever you deployed it in another data center or something like that, depending on who the vendor is what it does. And it grabs its configuration and comes up, and everything's kind of set for you, you know, because you've done all these pre-configuration tasks for your network. You've defined how you want your QoS to operate, what services you want to have priority over everything else. You know, all these cutoffs for, like, you know, jitter and everything else. And so you have this hybrid WAN model that you're using broadband internet alongside MPLS or whatever else. Or there's some places that are using just broadband internet, right? And that's the new thing. And it creates this secure layer 3 VPN overlay. But it creates an overlay over the network, and basically it's securing all the transmissions over regular public internet.
Interesting.
And it's really cool technology, just because now you've decreased the time that you have to spend on site, or even sending somebody out there. You can have the janitor walk into the closet and plug the thing in, and it's all done remotely. And you get into these areas. So SD-WAN's really cool. Just any of the software, SDN stuff, software-defined network stuff, NFV, network virtualization, network virtualized functions. That's some really cool things to deploying services on a virtualized server, as needed, push of a button. Well, we need an extra WILC, or we need a firewall on site. Click a button and boom, you've got a firewall out there that's already pre-configured with using the known settings for your network segment there. It just generates what it needs for the configuration and goes. So it's a wild time what we're living at, just because we're lazy engineers now. I think that's what I said earlier. You get a lot of innovation from laziness, and I think that's what happened. Someone who was particularly brilliant and lazy came up with this idea. But there's a ton of cool things out there that I try to stay up with.
So I guess that's the question then, because like even with INE, I mean that's one of the issues is Cisco owns 60% of the market, but the thing is, it actually is only 60. Like there's still 40% of what. And so how the hell? Because it's like if you want your CCIE, you throw INE a few bucks, you study your butt off. But like Riverbed and all of these names, I can't even keep track of all the names. How do you learn that stuff?
You got to go out there and you find it. You can't. Well, so I have a good position because I do consulting and everything. One, that gives me access to customer networks. They may have these things to pull. Another good thing is, I can shoot an email off to the sales guys in any one of these companies, say, hey, I do professional services. I'd like to know more about your company, so I can kind of use you as a something to keep in my back pocket. And they're more than willing to set up time to talk with me and explain the technology. Maybe send me a little documentation. Every once in a while, I get a freebie or some kind of demo equipment that I could play around with a little while, and I take it back in the lab, slap it in. So there are some benefits there. I don't think you would necessarily get that if you worked at Cisco or EMC. One of the larger vendors like that. I doubt anybody would be willing to ship you equipment like that. But so I just go out and I read. I scour the web. I read other people's blog posts who are dealing with the technology. To try to keep up with it, because there's just so much, and it changes so often. There's a lot of good resources out there that are just sitting there. So
is there something you do that, like, I mean, the good part with going with Cisco or EMC or any of these companies is more or less, as long as you stick with their core product lines, you know what you're getting. What is the decision process like with this SD-WAN, brand new startup company? What is the purchasing decision on tens of thousands of dollars in equipment on if this is their first or second product?
What would make a company go with this startup company? Oh, wow. I mean, I don't even know. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they go out and demonstrate. They demo the equipment. They go to trade shows, or they just try to get FaceTime in front of potential customers. And there is, some, they try to talk to people who are voices in the community to say, look at our product, look what it can do. And so they want people to write about it or demo it. Tech Field Day is a big thing. A lot of these companies, are you familiar with Tech Field Day?
No.
Okay, so Tom Hollingsworth and Stephen Foskett, they run this thing called Tech Field Day.
Okay.
And there's Tech Field Day has kind of overarching. There's Storage Field Day, Networking Field Day, Mobility Field Day, and Tech Field Day. So and it gives all these companies a means to kind of showcase their technology over a few days. So you might have 1 or 2 presentations per day. Okay. And what happens is the delegates are selected from the community, right? And from the networking community, or storage community, or virtualization community, whatever. And these are guys who blog or do podcasts and all that. And they bring these guys in, and all of their expenses are paid. The flights paid, hotel, food, that type of thing. They aren't paid in any way, and they don't have to blog or write about or talk about these products at all in one way or the other. That's not required, but it's kind of expected of them. And these guys, they do in-depth deep dives to the technology, and they ask all the questions everybody might potentially ask, and then they write about it, or they podcast about it, and so you get a lot of good information there. So if you're not familiar with Tech Field Day, go find Tech Field Day, follow them on Twitter or one of these guys, and you can see the new technologies as they're coming out. And there's a ton of YouTube videos, because they film it as well as live stream. So if you missed a stream, you can go back and look at some of the older ones. And that's one good way to keep up with it, and how some of the startups get out there. But I mean, it's really them just pushing at trade shows and trying to get in front of customers. And if you can demonstratively show how your product is different than, say, someone like Cisco's or HPE or whatever, then that's also a key factor as well. The Viptela is one of the SD-WAN guys, right? And they beat Cisco out for the Gap account, right? And it's it was actually kind of a big deal, because they ended up replacing their edge infrastructure from Cisco to Viptela, or they're in the process of still doing it. I don't know if they're complete yet, but they moved that along because Viptela had an easily deployable solution. Cisco IWAN, which is their SD-WAN stuff, that's kind of subcomponent there. It works. It's difficult to get deployed, but it works, right? But that was a problem. They couldn't stand up these new stores in time. But all of a sudden now you've got this Viptela product where you're standing up 60 stores in a weekend. And they're just tossing out, and we're like, this makes perfect sense. It does what we need it to do. It's simple, it's easy, and I think that's what a lot of these startup companies are trying to get to, because Cisco makes great product, right? Definitely, they do great things, but the problem is they've gotten too large, right? And a lot of the times this stuff has become too complicated. And when you get a simple product that does just what it's supposed to do, and it's easy to deploy and it's cheaper, people are going to go for that a lot of the time.
Cool. Well, I think we've been talking for quite a while now.
I think so too.
I think the camera guy is like,
too long.
So it was a good interview. Good talking with you today.
It's nice talking with you too.
Learned a lot. So this was Will Murrell, with Senior Network Engineer at Unicom Systems, Inc. A lot of good information today. Enjoyed doing this interview, and I'll see you guys in the next one.